Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Shevuot Daf Yudalid. We're going to get started with a review of the braita that we saw at the end of yesterday's daf. So the braita had said, the idea of the braita is to figure out how we know the Kohanim are included in the Kohen's part, the bull offering that the Kohen Gadol brings. It's not just for the Kohen Gadol and his family, it's also for all the other Kohanim. So it starts off suggesting, so first of all, there's the seir that for the rest of the people. And then there's the par for the Kohen Gadol. So the issue is going to be, where do the rest of the Kohanim go? So they don't fall into the category of the Seir Asher La'am because Eina Kohanim Mitchaplim Bo, because that's not for Kohanim. It says Asher La'am. So then, which one, Bamemit Kaprim, so what can they do? The partial Aaron. But what's the problem? Well, maybe not there, because there it says Asher Lo. So one is Asher La'am, it's for the nation. That's not Kohanim. The other one says Asher Lo, it's just for the Kohen Gadol. So where do they fall? So then the braita had said, Me'ata, at this point it sounds like Ein Lem Kapara. They don't have any atonement at all, which is what led to the whole next sugya, which we'll go back to in a minute. Then it says, well, there's another pasuk that says, V'yachaper l'kohanim. Yom Kippur is a day for atonement, also for the kohanim. So matzino lem kapara. Clearly they get atonement. So now we have to go back and figure out, well, then which one do they fall into? And then we say it must be the par of Aharon, because already we include other people. It's not just for him, it's also for his family. From there, we can include the other Kohanim as well. And then if that's not enough proof, well, it says Beit Aaron, B'chot Hashem, and Tehillim. It also says Beit HaLevi. The Levi are all the Levites. The Beit Aaron must be all the Kohanim. Okay, and then that's our proof, our second proof. So now we're going to go back, and Rabbi Yirmiyah basically asks, this braita sounds like it's not like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said, like this braita in the middle kind of says, well, the Kohanim then have no atonement. What do you mean they have no atonement? According to Rabbi Yehuda, they get atonement from the Seir HaMishtalech. Remember, they get a scapegoat, one is theirs. So Rava says, yeah, in fact, you're right. This is Rabbi Shimon, who says that the Kohanim don't atone with the Seir HaMishtalech, and then all they're left with is this par, but the par is not for them, so then they're really stuck without anything. However, Abaye says, okay, 4 lines from the bottom of yesterday's daf, afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. I can explain it even according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Hachikamra, what this braita is saying is, Me'ata elam kapara b'tumah mikdash v'kodashav. Wait, the topic of this braita is all the things that atone for, specifically according to Rabbi Yehuda, only things that have to do with impurity in the temple. So, Kashu Omer, Yechaper l'kohanim, matzinu sheyesh lam kapara b'shar ve'ra. And then the whole idea is when it says Yechaper, what it's saying is, at first it's suggesting, well, then they don't have any atonement for Tumat Mikdash v'Kodashav. Now, when it says Yechaper al Kohanim, which obviously is referring to all their sins in the Seir HaMishtalech, well, since they have, what they basically say is, well, it's obvious the Kohanim are included in that, in which case, just like them, they have atonement in other sins, with the Seir HaMishtalech, it must be that we can't exclude them from Tumat Mikdash, right? It must be they also get atonement from the Mikdash, in which case we have to put them somewhere, and then we're going to figure out, again, then the braita continues and proves, right? So that's the continuation here in our Gemara. So where do they get atonement from? Mutav shit kapur, but they're just repeating what I already read in the braita today. Mutav shit kapur paroshal Aaron shari utar mechalol etzel beito. Since already we allow Aarons to include people in his family, therefore we're going to say also we're going to include the par of Aharon here. Okay, the par of Aaron, sorry, is going to include all the kohanim. Va'al yit kapru b'seir nasa b'fnim shari lo utar mechalol. The seir b'fnim is just for the nation, not for anybody else. Now we're going to go to this last line, but if that's not enough of a proof, so why im why did they add this? If you say beito, it says his house, his family. It seems just his family. Kulam kriyim beito. Well, we'll prove it to you. That's not just his family, because here, look, shenemar beit Aharon b'chot Hashem, Yireh Hashem b'chot Hashem. Right from there, it's clear. Beit Aharon actually means all the kohanim, and therefore, in case you were to say no, it's just his family, we're going to show this obviously includes all the kohanim as well. Now they ask another question. Now we have a problem with the beginning of the braita. The braita had said it's obvious that the Seir Chatat is just for the nation because it says Asher La'am. But wait a minute, those words are needed for a different drasha. So why are you assuming Asher La'am means coming to exclude the kohanim? That's needed. The Torah says it has to be paid for by the people. This has to do with not who it covers, it's Who pays for it? It comes from communal funds. Like, for example, the Kohen Gadol can't pay on an individual basis for the sacrifice of the nation. So they say, no, that's not learned from Asher La'am, in which case Asher La'am isn't free to say what we say about it. No, Asher La'am really excludes the Kohanim. But where do we learn this issue of the nation has to pay for it? From a different pasuk. Ume'et adat b'nei Israel. Let's keep reading that pasuk. From the nation, from among the nation of the people of Israel. Yikach shnei seirezim l'chatat. That's where you're going to buy these 2 goat offerings, right? Buy it. These are the ones on Yom Kippur. This is Vayikra Tet Zayin, the chapter we read last week in Achrei mode of everything that happens on that day. So it's clear from there, it has to be bought from Bnei Israel. So that's learned from somewhere else, and therefore Asher La'am is free for what we said, excluding the Kohanim from getting atonement. But now, what about the Pasuk Asher Lo? The Pasuk Asher Lo by Aharon, that it's just for Aharon, we thought it meant it's just for Aharon, it doesn't atone for the sins of the Kohanim. And then we had to prove it from some other way. But why do they say Asher Lo is coming to exclude the Kohanim? That's actually excluding something else. Hi Asher Lo, Lahachi Udat, it's coming for something else. Hi, Lahachi Udat, it's coming for this. Hi Mibaile, no, it's needed for something else. L'chidetanya, as it says in the following braita. Mishalahu mevi ve'eno mevi mishal tzibor. The Kohen Gadol brings from his own money, okay? Just like the communal had to be paid for by the community, the Kohen Gadol has to be paid for by the Kohen Gadol. Yachol yavi mishal tzibor. She'en hatzibor mitkaplim bo. Well, we get that it's not going to come from the community because the community doesn't have atonement by it. However, yavi mishal chava kohanim. Maybe it should be a joint payment from all the other kohanim. She'chava kohanim mitkaplim bo, because his brothers, the kohanim, get atonement from this. Talmud lamal asher lo. Because it says asher lo, that means it belongs to the kohen, meaning the kohen has to pay for it. Yachol yavive maybe kasher. Well, maybe you would say, okay, fine. The coin's not supposed to pay for, let it come from someone else's money. But if it did anyway, okay, it's not ideal, but it works. Talmud Lamal, Shuv Asher Lo. Now, Asher Lo appears in 2 psukim, also in the 6th pasuk in that chapter, in chapter 16, verse 6, and also in 11. Both say, Yikriv Aaron Parachatat Asher Lo. Aaron sacrifices the bull sin offering that is his. So, they say here, you might have thought, Lo Yaviv, may be kasher. But Talmud Lamar Shuv Asher Lo, they do it a second time, and we already learned this principle. Hakatuv Shana Alav La'akev. In the world of Kodshim, if something is repeated twice, it means it has to happen that way. So because it repeated it twice, it means this is essential. Can't be done any other way. The Kohen Gadol has to pay for it himself. Now, if so, how do we use Asher Lo to teach us that maybe it means all the Kohanim were excluded from this sacrifice? It's used to say the Kohen Gadol to pay for it, but not that they're excluded. So they say the following: Tana hachi kakashile. Author of the braita was troubled by this. Mishna b'da'am delo mechapre. Now, the one of the nation doesn't atone for the Kohanim. Now, what's the difference between that? Well, what's the issue there? Why doesn't it atone for the Kohanim? Because delo kachas rebe mamona. They didn't spend any money on it. It was from the community's money and not the Kohanim's money. Dichtiv asher la'am, as we learned, comes from the nation. Well, but on that same note, the one of Aaron also, they're not involved in the payment because of the Asher Lo drasha, which teaches you, now we see this all interconnected. Because they don't pay, this is very reasonable to think. If you don't pay for something, you don't make the effort, you're not part of it. And then the braita teaches you, no, they're anyway called beito and they're included anyway. Bishlama Rabbi Shimon. Now let's go back, okay? And we have a study guide today, so I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go back and see the chart. Okay, so first of all, here's a chart. You might want to have used it in the beginning of Daf. I forgot to share my screen. But the whole machlok at Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, which sacrifices atone for who and what. Okay, now there's the Shiur Mishalech where we do a vidur. You might remember in the davening, there's 3 confessions and there's 2 blood sprinklings. Now, the blood sprinklings, this chart is maybe a little deceptive. I probably should have done it a little differently, but it shows you. The Shiur Mishalech kind of organized in a bit of a different way. I could organize this in 2 ways. I'll show you first how I organize it in the chart, and then I'll tell it in a bit of a different way. The Shiur Mishalech, you do a vidoy on, okay? So when they send the Shiur off Lazazel, there's no sacrifice, so there's no blood sprinkling, but you do a confession. Now, both confession and sprinkling the blood are ways of getting atonement. So there's a vidoy on the Siyar Mishalach for all the sins. Again, whether you're Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, it depends whether it's all the sins of the whole nation. That's Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon, which is just Yisraelim, not Kohanim. Then you have the Siyar that's done bifnim, where you sprinkle the blood, and that's for Yisrael, not for Kohanim at all. Nobody thinks it is. And then you have the Par Kohen Gadol, which is also sprinkled. Now, there's two sprinklings, but it's confusing because it's not that one is the seer, one is the par. You mix the blood of the seer and the par together, and you do two sprinklings, one inside, one outside. Okay, but both the blood of the seer bifnim and the blood of the par kohen gadol get sprinkled, and there's atonement from them. And then there's the vidoy, and there's two confessions on the bull offering of the kohen. So again, you have the sprinkling of the blood of the seer that goes inside. You have the par kohen gadol, which also has sprinkling of blood, and you have confession. So what we're going to focus on right now is that the Par Kohen Gadol has a sprinkling of blood and has two confessions. So what do we need all this for? So Bishlam Mother Rabbi Shimon, Hainu Dechtiv Trei Viduyim V'Dama Par. There's two confessions and the Dama Par according to Rabbi Shimon. Why? Chad Kineged Siyar Nasa B'Fnim. So one is the regular Israelim get the Siyar B'Fnim, and what does that atone for? If you knew about it, forgot, and knew again. So you need that now for the Kohanim. So that's one. Chad Kineged Siyar Nasa B'Chutz. Well, then there's the one done outside. And that one atones for Yisrael for you didn't know about it at the end, but you did know about it at the beginning. That you knew you were impure, you forgot. And then you still don't know yet that you went into the temple while you were impure. You just, you still haven't figured it out. That's what the one outside atones for. So now we need the Kohanim to get one there, right? The par has to atone for that as well. That's two. And then what's left? Chad Kineged Siyar Mishalach. Remember, the Siyar Mishalach, according to Rabbi Shimon, is not for the Kohanim. So now they need a vidoy to atone for all their other sins, right? So they have two vidoys and a dam, and that covers all three topics. Ella the Rabbi Yehuda, obviously we're going to have a problem for Rabbi Yehuda because we're going to get rid of the vidoy for all the other sins, because all the other sins get covered by the seir that's sent off the cliff, right? That, according to Rabbi Yehuda, covers everybody. So the Rabbi Yehuda trei viduyim v'dama parlamali v'chad vidoy v'damo sagi would have been enough one confession and one sprinkling of the blood, one for what the general Jews atone for in the seer outside, one for what they atone for inside, and right the yediot b'tchila v'lo b'sof, or ein ba yediot, right? Ein ba yediot b'tchila v'yesh ba yediot b'sof. I think I might have said this wrong before. I'm just going to clarify again in case I said it wrong. The seir b'fnim is, I think I said it wrong. I said the olav yored. Wipe what I said. The seir b'fnim is you knew before, you forgot, and you still don't know. Okay? Seir b'chutz is you didn't know in the beginning and now you know at the end. Sorry that I confused that. Okay. But getting back. Anyway, it was a side point. So now we have Ela Rabbi Yehuda. So what do we need these for? So again, echad lo. So now we're going to explain. Even though we really only need two, we're going to add a third. Why? Because echad lo ve'echad lebeito. One is for the Kohen and one is for his family. And one is for the rest of the Kohanim. And Kiditana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, as the Tan Debei Rabbi Yishmael says, why do we need two separate videos? Why can't he just include, do you remember we said this on Yom Kippur? First himself and his family, and then all the Kohanim. Why don't you just put it together? Well, Kiditana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, Kachi Midat Beit Hadin Noheget. This is the way, Midat Hadin Noheget, sorry. This is the way the Midat Hadin, the Midah of judgment works. Mutav Yavos Akad Yichaper Al Chayav. This is how judgment works. Better to person who's innocent should come and plead for the one who's guilty. Someone who's guilty shouldn't come into court to plead for someone who's guilty. And therefore, what do we need? We need the Kohen to atone for himself first before he can start asking for atonement for other people. And that's why he does his own first. And this is the classic, put on your oxygen mask before you put your oxygen mask on your child, right? On every airplane, that's what they say. You have to take care of yourself first, and only then can you take care of other people. And with that, Hadran alach Shevuot shtayim. So let's just review this part of the daf, and then we'll start our new chapter. So this part of the daf dealt with the braita, almost exclusively, the braita that had to find where did the Kohanim get their atonement, and within the prism of both Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, right? Did the braita work only according to one or only according to the other, right? In the end, we explained it both possible ways. And then we went into some of the other details, like some of the drashot they're trying to figure out why they're rushing from there. Aren't those words used for something else? And why do we have those extra words of the Beit Hashem, Beit Aaron, that extra proof? What did that add? And then the last thing about what we need the two vidoys and the par for, both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to Rabbi Shimon. Now we're going to start a new chapter, which we started with yediot shayin shein arba, and now we're going to go. Now the Mishnah hadn't exactly spelled out all the cases. We're going to go and spell them out, and then we're going to go back and try to figure out again what does it exactly mean yediot tuma shtayim shein arba. So the Mishnah is going to explain yediot tuma shtayim shein arba, and again we're going to have all the Mishnayot here. It'll be a very long section of Mishnah. Nitma v'yada, so you became impure, and you knew you were impure. Okay, we know this already. This is just good review. V'ne'alma mimenu hatuma. Okay, and I put a chart here. And then you forgot, right? Forgot that you were impure. This is the chart. Okay, you knew you were tame, and there were kodashim in front of you. Okay, the first case is going to be tuma as it relates to kodashim, to sacrificial items. Then you forgot. You forgot you were tamei. That's case one. The outgrowth of that case is not that you forgot you were tamei, but zachor, right? So you were ne'almami menu tuma, but zachor takodesh. That's case one. You remembered it was sacrificial meat. Or ne'alami menu akodesh. That's case two, which I called case three here because shtayim shem arba. It's going to be 1 and 2 are the main cases, and 3 and 4 are the sub cases, and then 3 aleph and 4 aleph are kind of outgrowths of 3 and 4. You'll see. Or you forgot it was a sacrificial item and you just remember that you were impure. Or that's kind of an outgrowth because what if you forgot both of them? Either which way, it's all the same. Now, when you ate it, you had no idea. After you ate it, you remembered either that you were impure or that this was sacrificial meat, or you remember both because you forgot both. That's when you bring a classic olav yored. Nitma biyada, okay, case 2 now. Okay, that was case 1 and 3 and 3 aleph. Now, nitma biyada, you became impure and you knew. V'ne'alma mimenu tuma, but you forgot then that you were impure. V'zachor hamikdash, but you remembered the mikdash. Or ne'alma mimenu mikdash, you forgot about the mikdash, you forgot where it was, or that you can't go in impure. V'zachor tuma, you remembered impurity. Ne'alma mimenu zeh, or you forgot both. Okay, so again, we have all 3 possibilities. Either you forgot the tumah, or you forgot the temple, or you forgot both. You went in not knowing whatever it was you didn't know. Once you left, you knew. You bring the korban olav yored. Okay, whether you went into the azara or you went into the extra part of the azara. Now, this is they added things to the azara. They added different sections to it. And like in Herod's time, for example, they expanded everything. And then they explained, by the way, in order for something to be Tosefet Azara, which you would be liable for, because it's in the Azara that you specifically can't go if you're impure, okay, you can't add onto them unless you have the following things. Melech, there's a king. Navi, there's a prophet. Urim v'tumim, that was a way they would communicate with God through the Urim v'tumim. Sanhedrin shel shavim v'echad, you need a Sanhedrin of 71. B'shtei todot, they would carry 2 lachmei todat, they were bread offerings, and like Thanksgiving breads, and b'shir, and they would sing. Ubeitim malchim, and the beitim would have a procession. Shtei todot acharihem, there were 2 people, right? There were 2 people or 2 breads that were being carried by the people. B'chol Yisrael acharihem, and behind them are the people. Hapnimit, now moving to Amubet, the pnimit ne'echelet hachitzonah nisrefet. This is not the pnimi and the chitzoni of the chatat. This is the inner loaf gets eaten, the outer loaf gets burned. Rashi tells us the Gemara is going to explain this, so we'll deal with this much later. If it's not done with these things, okay, there's, by the way, Shuli Mishkan's flashback is all about things having relating to this stuff in Jerusalem and the adding on to Jerusalem. Now, if you didn't do all these things when you added on, sounds like it means all these things, although we're going to see later on Machlokes in the Gemara, not in today's stuff. If you go in there, you're not going to be liable. What if you became impure in the azara? Meaning you're in the temple and you become impure. And then you forget. But you remembered that you're in the temple. You just forgot a minute later that you're impure. Or you forgot you're in the mikdash. You remembered, though, that you became impure. Or you forget both right away. And you bow down. Or you stayed long enough that you could have bowed. We'll get also to this later in the Gemara and explain the difference. Balo ba'aruka, or you took a long path out. In other words, you have to take the quickest path out of there when you become impure. Right? This is a weird case where the impurity happens in there. Okay, like let's say a sheretz gets onto you somehow. Someone dies in the temple. So you got to get out of there as quickly as possible. So if you leave Baruka, you're chayav. You have to, right? Any of these things happen, you waited too long, you bowed down in the temple, you're liable. Biktsara, if you went out the shortest way, you're patur. Okay, then you don't have to bring a korban. Now they say something strange about this. Zoe mitzvah taseh b'mikdash she'ein chayavin aleha. Okay, we're talking now about a totally different topic. Par helem davar shel tzibur. This is a par that you bring, a bull offering, when the Sanhedrin teaches something incorrectly and the majority of the people follow. Now, if this were to happen and they taught, let's say, they taught you that this is the way to get out quickest, and it wasn't, it was a longer way. And then everyone should theoretically be liable, but we're not going to make everyone liable because that's what the Sanhedrin taught them. So instead of making every person liable, we bring one korban par halim davar shel tzibur. It's when the tzibur messed up on something because the Beit Din taught it wrong. That's not going to happen in this case. If that were to happen in this case, you wouldn't bring a par halim davar shel tzibur, and the reason is simple. It doesn't say it explicitly, but the commentaries explain because that's only given when you have a chatat, a regular sin offering. This is the sliding scale sin offering, which we've already seen is kind of lighter than the regular sin offering, and therefore this is a case where you're not going to be liable a par halim davar shel tzibur if that happened. Now they bring an example from Nida, and you'll see in a minute why Nida, because it's kind of similar. It could be a case where the couple is engaging in sexual relations, and in the middle she becomes impure, just like someone's impure in the temple. She could get her period right then. So how she would know is a good question, okay, but let's put that aside. What would be the case of this? He's in the middle of having relations with a woman who's not in nida. And then she says, I became impure. Okay, Rashi says, achshav, like right now. Now he immediately leaves her body. Now the issue is, if he leaves immediately, he still has an erection. Now if he has an erection, the issue is, we're going to say now, chayav. In that case, you're going to be liable. So now, we're actually talking about a very strange case because we're talking about, besides the case itself is strange. Okay, if he leaves while he's still erect, he's chayav. Let's just finish the sentence and I'll explain. Because when he goes out while his body is still erect, he has pleasure by leaving her body. And therefore, he has to bring a korban for this. But it really means he has to bring a korban. We're talking about that would be a case, since normally if it was just him doing this, it would be a chatat, a regular sin offering. Which means that now you have to have this weird thing, which is if the Sanhedrin taught everybody that they could exit the woman's body if she became impure when this happened, in the kind of situation like this, he could leave the body while he was still erect, and it was a mistake, and they taught it wrong. And the majority, that's why it would be very strange that this would all happen. The majority of the community would have this happen to them, and they would exit in that way. Then you would bring the par halim davar shel tzibur. A very bizarre case. Anyway, okay. Now we move on. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, we're still in the Mishna. Hasheretz v'ne'elam mimenu. He darshans this pasuk that we've seen a number of times already, Vayikra chapter 5, verse 2. O nefesh asher tigah b'chol davar tameh, o b'nivlat hayat me'ah, right? You touch something tameh, a dead body of an animal, a chaya or behemah, o b'nivlat sheretz tameh, or a nevela, a dead body, right? A dead creature. V'ne'elam mimenu. Now, what they're going to point out here, the first Rasha, Rabbi Eliezer, is that the word ne'elam is right next to the sheretz. So because of that, they say, Hasheretz v'ne'elam mimenu, al helem sheretz chayav ve'eno chayav al helem mikdash. You're chayav only if you forgot that sheretz was asur, but you're not going to be chayav for forgetting about the mikdash. Okay, that's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva Omer, v'ne'elam mimenu v'hu tameh, al helem tuma chayav ve'eno chayav al helem mikdash. Rabbi Akiva says also that you're not chayav al helem mikdash, but he learns it from the words, the end of that pasuk, ne'elam mimenu v'hu tameh. From there you see, the ha'alama has to do with forgetting your tameh and not forgetting the mikdash. Remember, we learned this in the beginning of the Masechet. That Rabbi Akiva has this unique position that you're not chayav for helem mikdash or helem kodshim. If you forgot they were kodshim, you forgot mikdash, you don't bring the korban olev yored. And we said the Mishnah doesn't accord with Rabbi Akiva because the Mishnah says there's 4 cases, and the 4 cases include, as we saw before, helem mikdash also. You forgot the mikdash, you forgot impurity. Okay, so both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer say there is no such thing as helem mikdash or kodashim. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, and this we learned already, right? We referenced it from here, v'ne'elam shnei pamim, because that pasuk says ne'elam, and the next pasuk also says ne'elam, l'chayev al helim tuma v'al helim mikdash. Those 2 cases are included with the double words helim, but it's adding 2 other cases. Okay, and those are the cases we saw in the Mishna. Now comes the Gemara. I'm a Rav Papa La'abai, and I'm going to bring back up the study guide, and you'll see the chart, the next chart, to help you understand this. Rav Papa says to Abai, Shtaim Shem Arba, Shtaim Shem Shesh Havyan. Seems like it should be 6 cases. Now, Rav Papa understands yediot tumah, counting it differently than we counted before. He says, what does it mean we're counting yediot tumah? How many knowledges you had of impurity? There's the yediah before and the yediah after, and he's going to count each one twice, and from there he's going to get to 6. Yediot tumah tchila v'sof. You knew you were tameh, forgot you were tameh, and either ate kachim or went into the temple, and then you knew again you were tameh. That's 2, because it was knowing you're tameh at the beginning and knowing you're tameh at the end. Yediat kodesh tchila v'sof. Well, assuming we're taking the cases of Tuma Kodesh and Mikdash are both also Helem Mikdash and Helem Kodshim. So you knew these were Kodshim, then you forgot, then you ate them, and then you remembered later. Mikdash Tchila v'Sof, right? Again, there's 2 more. And then Mikdash adds another 2. You knew there was a temple, forgot, you went into the temple while you were impure, and then you remembered again that there was a temple later. So that's 6. To which Abai says to him, what do you mean 6? This is actually 8 according to you, because you kind of stood 2 cases together. You put together Tuma, and then you ate Kodshim or went to the temple, but really those are 2 separate. You knew you were impure, you ate Kodshim, and then you found out again that you were impure, right? You knew you were impure, you forgot, you went into the temple, and then you remembered again. So those 2 cases, right, should be added. So that's another 2 cases where you knew you were impure, forgot you were impure, knew you were impure, forgot you were impure. So that would be there would be 8 altogether. To which he then answers halokashi, but this really isn't difficult because shem tuma achati. That's not a difficulty. Rav Papa answers Abai because I put tuma in one category. There's tuma, there's kachim, there's mikdash, and 3 yediot before, 3 yediot after. That gets me to 6. Okay, mikama comes sheet having. We still have 6. So how do we explain 6 when the Mishna says 4? Amar Rav Papa lo lam timne havyan. There really are 8, but okay, going with Abai's chart, it's really 8. You knew you were impure, forgot, ate kachim. Again, found out you were impure. You knew you were impure, went to the temple. Forgot, went to the temple. And then found out, and again, knew there was a mikdash. Forgot, blah, blah. Knew there were kachim, forgot, blah, blah, blah. But why do we get to 4 and not 8? Because arba kamaita de lo maitin lidei korban lo kachashi. Well, the Mishna didn't count the 4. When they talked about yediot tumah, they didn't mean the 4 yediot you knew in the beginning. Obviously, that's a necessity, but it's not really in counting knowledge. What we mean is when you figured out and then you became obligated the korban. That's the one at the end, the 4 at the end. When you find out, oh, no, I forgot I was tameh. I knew it at the beginning, but now I remember, that's when you're chayv a korban. The fact that you know in the beginning you're tameh, that doesn't obligate you a korban at that moment. So arba batriyata, the 4 last ones, demaitili de korban kachashiv. So the first ones which don't bring you to a korban, you don't have to, they didn't count in the Mishna. The 4 at the end of the Mishna were the ones that you have to bring a korban. The Ika de Amri, some people say that Amr of Papa, the opposite, lo alam timne havi, and there really are 8. For arba kamaite, delayna b'kol Torah kula kachashiv. The 4 of the idea in the beginning. Now, let me explain. When you eat a korban chatat, you eat chaylev, for example, which obligates you to bring a korban chatat. So you didn't know it was chaylev and you ate it. And then you find out it was chaylev. Now you have to bring a korban chatat. It doesn't matter if you knew in the beginning or didn't know in the beginning. That's irrelevant. It's an irrelevant factor. So when it says yediot tumah shtayim shem arba, they're talking about the first 4 yediot. Because that's a unique halacha specifically in this type of impurity. It doesn't exist by any other type of impurity. All the other, by any type of, sin offering. All the other sin offerings you bring for forgetting something, it's only you forgot at the moment. Like I forgot it was Shabbat and I started doing, Shabbat. I didn't have to, it doesn't have to be that I knew it was Shabbat, forgot, and then did it. No, if I just forget it's Shabbat by accident and I do malacha, I'm obligated. I don't need the yediah at the beginning. So that's what's unique about these, and therefore the 4 beginning ones are the ones they counted and not the ends. But the last 4, which are in every case of shogeg, lo kachashiv, they didn't mention those. By Rav Papa. Rav Papa now asks, what if you forgot in general that there was any such thing as laws of impurity? So they said, what kind of case are you talking about? If it means you didn't remember whether a sheretz is what's impure or a frog. That's any child knows that from school. Everybody knows that. That can't be, you can't say I forgot that. It's something everybody knows. You can't claim I forgot. It's fine. So you knew there was a sheretz, and you could become impure from the sheretz, and you knew which one. Ukigon denagabacha adasha, but you didn't remember how much. And you touched the size of a lentil, and you didn't know. Lo yada ika adasha imatame ilomatame. You didn't know if ka'adasha is that the size that makes you impure or not. So now they say mai. So here are the two sides. Kevan yada dematame sheretz ba'olam, and since you knew there was such a thing of trumat sheretz, we call that yediot. That was you knew. O Dilma, kevanda adasha lo yada imatami ilomatame ha'alamahi. Or do we say no? This is a halama. This is I forgot because you didn't know the details of it. Do we call that a halama? Teku. And we don't know the answer. By Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah now asks, classic, funny, it's actually a really interesting Rabbi Yirmiyah question because Rabbi Yirmiyah was from Babylonia and goes to Israel. And he has some issues kind of adjusting. And here he asks a great question of an immigrant type question. Ben Bavel Sha'ala Eretz Israel, a Babylonian goes to Israel. When he doesn't know where the place of the temple is, right? He didn't grow up there. He doesn't understand. He doesn't know where it was. So what do you say? Aliva demand. So they ask, according to who is he asking this question? If it's Rabbi Akiva who requires, there has to be, right? This is what we've learned all along. Has to be, in order to require, be obligated, the korban sliding scale offering, you have to have knowledge at the beginning and knowledge at the end. So if you say it's Rabbi Akiva who holds you need knowledge at the beginning, in a minute we'll see Rabbi Akiva doesn't require that, even though we've been learning all until now we do. But he doesn't require you at all if you forget mikdash. That's not what this korban is for. Remember, that's Rabbi Akiva. We saw that earlier today. He only requires if you forgot that you were impure, not if you forgot where the temple is. So, or that the temple is forbidden. So let's go to Rabbi Ishmael. He obligates for Heli Mikdash, so it must be him. Well, the question was asked according to him, but he actually, we're going to learn this later. Rabbi Akiva doesn't require that you know about it from the beginning. He says, it's like we said before about the chalev. As long as you forgot at the time you went into the temple, you don't even need to have known before it was forbidden. At the moment you were in the temple, you had no idea, and you find out later, you bring a korban olav yored. So this wouldn't be a question, because who cares about the yediot b'tchila? There's no requirement of it. And that's what this question was about. So, lotzricha liba de Rebbe. It must be according to Rebbe. Remember, we have Rebbe who, and we said our Mishna, Rabbi Yudan Nasi kind of was the editor of our Mishna, right? And he did one like Rabbi Akiva, one like Rabbi Ishmael, and we saw this opinion of Rebbe there, which is Debai Yediyah B'tchila M'chayev Al Heli Mikdash. He himself does require an Heli Mikdash, and he also requires Yediyah at the beginning. So he's the perfect opinion that we can ask this question according to. And then here's the question: Amar Yediyat Beit Rabo Shma Yediyah, and then he says, knowing it from having learned it, like about what everyone knows what the temple is. You learned that there. Is that yediyah? My kevan diyadadika mikdash ba'olam yediyah. Do we say since you knew there was a temple of the world, that's considered yediyah? Odilma kevan de mekomolo yada ha'alamahi. Or maybe just because you didn't know where it is, even though you knew of its existence, but you didn't know where it is, maybe that would be a halama. Teku. And with that, we end with the question. Okay, one last thing for today. So menani mile. How do we know that these are the requirements, right? The Kohen, the Navi, the Melech, not a Kohen, the Melech, the Navi, the Urim V'Tumim, all those things that we listed. How do we know that those are all requirements for adding to the Azara? To Amar Kra, we learn it from a pasuk in Shemot with the Mishkan. K'chol asher ani mareh utcha tavnit hamishkan ve'tavnit kol kelav v'chein ta'asu. Okay, just like I'm showing you now, this is how you should do it, and the way they darshan, this is how you should do it, lidolhot, also for future generations. And that's why whatever was done then, that needs to happen now. And then, there was no king then. Well, they say Moshe was like a king. They had the Shivim Zkenim, so that's like the Sanhedrin. They had, right, with Moshe at the top, so it was 71, right? They had they had the Urim V'Tumim, etc. They had the Navi. Okay, so that's how we get all those criteria. So, review of the second part of our daf from the beginning of chapter 2. We had the different cases of Yediot Tumah, and then we had some other things in the Mishna, which we'll come back to later. I'm not going to bother reviewing them right now, but then we had this whole question. It sounds like it's 6, maybe it's 8, right? And then we explained how we get to 4, why we call it 4. And then we had what exactly is halama? What does it mean to forget something? And we had some questions about that. And with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day.